The oldest known picture of a ghost may be about 3,500 years old. It does not show a pale woman floating through a hallway. It shows a bearded man who needs the living to help him leave. More than 3,000 years later, a family in North London filled over 180 hours of tape with knocks, crashes, and the rough voice of a dead man. Some events were witnessed by police and reporters. Some were caught as tricks. A philosopher will follow a chained figure through an empty house, a worker will die because his clothes match a ghost story, and two sisters will turn knocks in a bedroom into a new religion. But the history of ghosts does not start with a white sheet, a camera, or a dark hallway. It starts with a hungry dead man on a piece of clay. A family in ancient Mesopotamia could bury a person and still have work to do. Water had to be poured, food had to be offered, the name of the dead had to be remembered. They called the spirit of a dead person an etemmu. Most of the dead were expected to remain in the underworld. Trouble began when someone had no proper burial, no family offerings, or unfinished business with the living. Then the dead could come home. This was not only a religious idea, it shaped ordinary family duties. The dead still belonged to the household, which meant neglect could have consequences. Illness, bad dreams, strange sounds, and runs of bad luck could all be blamed on a spirit that had not been cared for. A clay tablet now held by the British Museum shows how practical the response could be. The tablet dates to around 1500 BCE. Curator Irving Finkel argues that its faint drawing may be the oldest surviving picture of a ghost. The image is easy to miss. Under light from the right angle, a bearded man appears with his hands tied while a woman leads him away. The writing gives instructions for making a male and female figure. The lonely male ghost is given a companion, supplies, and a path back to the land of the dead. The ritual ends with a warning not to look behind. Whether this is truly the oldest ghost picture is still an interpretation, not a settled record. What it tells us about the belief is clearer. A ghost was not a cloud of smoke. It was a dead person with a specific need. If you have ever kept a photograph, a voice message, or a small object because it belonged to someone who died, the feeling is not difficult to understand. The ancient version simply asked more of the living: food, water, memory. And when the missing duty was burial, the ghost could turn an entire house into a warning. Pliny the Younger wrote to a friend around the end of the 1st century. He wanted to know whether ghosts were real, and he included a story that people were already telling about a house in Athens. The house was large. It was also strangely cheap. At night, the sound of iron moved through the rooms. First came a distant rattle. Then the noise grew louder until an old man appeared. Pliny described him as thin and dirty, with long hair, shackles around his legs, and chains in his hands. People who stayed in the house stopped sleeping. Some became ill. The building was finally abandoned, but a notice remained outside in case someone who did not know the story wanted to rent it. A philosopher named Athenodorus arrived in Athens and saw the low price. He asked why the house was empty, heard the warning, and rented it anyway. That night he placed a lamp, writing tablets, and a stylus in the front room. He sent his servants farther inside and began to work. Then the chains started. Athenodorus kept writing as the sound entered the room. The figure appeared and beckoned. He raised one hand, made the ghost wait, and finished the line in front of him. Only then did he follow. The chained man crossed the house, entered the courtyard, and disappeared. Athenodorus marked the spot with grass. The next morning, officials dug into the ground and found a skeleton tangled in iron. The bones received a public burial. Pliny says the haunting ended. This story has nearly every part of a modern haunted house tale. The empty building, the night noise, the brave visitor, the hidden body, the final act that lets the dead rest. But Pliny did not present it as proven fact. He had heard the story from others, and he was asking his friend what to believe. The argument was already part of the haunting. The rule underneath the story was older than Rome. A person who had not been buried correctly could not leave correctly. That rule survived for another 1,000 years. The next ghosts did not fade through walls. They came back with weight. The Romans did not wait for a haunting before dealing with the dead. Families held rites for ancestors and marked days when restless spirits were believed to move close to the home. Ovid described one of these rites in his poem Fasti. During Lemuria, the head of the household rose at midnight and walked barefoot through the dark house. He washed his hands, placed black beans in his mouth, and threw them behind him without looking back. 9 times he said that the beans would free his family. The spirits were expected to follow the food. Then he washed again, struck bronze to make a loud noise, and ordered the ghosts to leave. 9 times. Rome tried to keep the dead outside with a ritual. In medieval England, some stories said the dead came back with bodies. Christian Europe changed the language around death, but it did not remove the fear of an improper ending. Stories of revenants appeared in chronicles, sermons, and local reports. These were dead people who returned with bodies. William of Newburgh included several of them in his History of England, written in the 1190s. He said there were so many reports in his own time that recording all of them would be too much work. One case came from Buckinghamshire. A man died and was buried. The next night, according to William, he climbed back into bed with his wife and nearly crushed her under the weight of his body. He returned again. Then neighbors reported seeing him. Local men wanted to open the grave and burn the corpse. Hugh, the Bishop of Lincoln, chose another method. He wrote a letter of forgiveness, ordered the grave opened, and had the letter placed on the dead man's chest. William says the visits stopped. This revenant was not a pale shadow. It entered a bed and pressed down with the weight of a human body. Over time, that heavy corpse began to lose its body. Burial shrouds, stage costumes, churchyard stories, and popular prints gave the ghost a simpler form. A person in white. By the start of the 19th century, that image was clear enough to frighten a neighborhood. It was also clear enough to get an innocent man killed. Near the end of 1803, people in Hammersmith, west of London, began reporting a ghost in the streets. Some claimed that a tall white figure had appeared in the dark. Patrols formed. Men carried weapons. Fear had become a local routine. On the night of January 3, 1804, a 29-year-old excise officer named Francis Smith was out looking for the figure. He carried a gun. Smith saw someone dressed in white and called out. Then he fired. The person in front of him was Thomas Millwood, a tradesman walking home. His work clothes were white. In the dark, they looked like the costume the neighborhood had already attached to its ghost. Millwood died in the street. Smith told the court that he believed he had fired at the Hammersmith Ghost. The jury tried to return a verdict of manslaughter. The judge refused it. The choice was murder or acquittal. The jury found Smith guilty of murder. His death sentence was later reduced to 1 year of hard labor. After the trial, a shoemaker named John Graham reportedly admitted that he had been walking around under a white sheet to frighten an apprentice. There is no clear record that Graham was punished. Millwood had not dressed as a ghost. He was simply wearing the white clothes of his trade. The white figure now had a standard costume. Soon it would gain a voice, a ticket price, and a place in front of a camera. If you are enjoying this journey through the changing shape of ghosts, subscribe. There is a new history and mystery every week. Once people expected a ghost to make a sign, a knock was enough. In March 18, 1948, Kate and Maggie Fox were living with their parents in Hydesville, New York. The girls reported rapping sounds inside the family home. They asked questions. The knocks appeared to answer. Neighbors came to listen. The family developed a code. 1 knock could mean no. 2 could mean yes. Longer sequences could select letters and spell words. The story left the farmhouse almost immediately. The girls performed in public, their older sister helped manage them, and the Hydesville rappings became a starting point for modern spiritualism. The movement offered something older religions did not always offer: direct contact. A person did not have to wait for heaven to see a relative again. A medium could arrange the meeting this week. That promise became more powerful during years of mass death. The American Civil War left hundreds of thousands of families without fathers, sons, brothers, and friends. A dark room and a few knocks gave grief a place to speak. In 1888, Maggie Fox publicly said the sounds had been tricks made with an apple on a string and joints in the feet. She demonstrated part of the method on a stage. She later withdrew the confession. The movement continued either way. The knocks had made ghosts audible. Photography was about to make them visible. In the early 1860s, William Mumler produced images of living people with faint human figures behind them. He said his first spirit photograph happened by accident and showed a dead cousin. Customers paid to sit with the shapes of lost relatives. The images were especially powerful after the Civil War because photography already felt exact and modern. A ghost in a story could be doubted. A ghost on a glass plate looked like a record. Mumler was tried for fraud in 1869. Showman P.T. Barnum had a fake photograph made of himself with the ghost of Abraham Lincoln to show the court how easily such pictures could be produced. Mumler was acquitted, but spirit photography never lost the shadow of fraud. In 1882, the Society for Psychical Research was formed in Britain. Its members tried to investigate apparitions, mediums, strange sounds, and claims of contact with the dead. The Ghost now had investigators, case files, and equipment. Knocks, photographs, witness statements. Every tool meant to test the Ghost also taught the public what evidence should look like. Nearly a century later, all of those tools arrived at one small house in North London. In August 1977, Peggy Hodgson called the police to 284 Green Street in Enfield. She lived in the small council house with her 4 children. 2 of the children had heard knocking in the walls. Peggy said furniture had moved. A police constable who came to the house reported seeing a chair wobble and slide, although she could not tell what had caused it. That small uncertainty opened the door. The Daily Mirror sent reporters and photographers. The Society for Psychical Research was contacted. Investigator Maurice Grosse arrived on September 5th. Writer Guy Lyon Playfair joined him soon after. The reports grew. Toys flew across rooms, doors opened, drawers moved, beds shook, knocks appeared to answer questions. The activity seemed to center on 11-year-old Janet Hodgson. Then came the voice. Janet spoke in a rough, low sound that appeared much older than she was. The voice gave the name Bill and claimed a connection to a man who had died in the house years earlier. Recordings of it became the most famous evidence in the case. Grosse and Playfair spent long periods inside the home. Their tape recordings eventually totaled more than 180 hours. That is, more than 7 straight days of sound. Neighbors, reporters, technicians, and police officers also reported incidents. The family was not alone. But Janet was caught bending spoons and trying to bend an iron bar when she thought nobody was watching. Grosse saw her strike the ceiling with a broom handle and hide a tape recorder. Janet and Margaret also admitted playing tricks for journalists, although they later withdrew the confession. Some investigators left believing the girls had staged the haunting. Grosse and Playfair stayed and argued that the tricks did not explain everything they had witnessed. Enfield produced more evidence than the old ghost stories ever had. It also produced clear evidence that some events were tricks. So what could the recordings really prove? A recording proves that a sound was recorded. It does not always reveal what made the sound. A photograph preserves a shape, but that shape could be a person, reflected light, dust, or a double exposure. A witness may report exactly what they saw without seeing what caused it. That is why the ghost changed with the evidence people trusted. Ancient families looked for neglected burial duties. Pliny's story offered chains and buried bones. Hammersmith gave the ghost white clothing. Spiritualists listened for coded knocks. Mumler used photographs. Enfield used microphones and long hours of tape. Today, the usual tool is a phone. Ghosts appear in doorbell video, night mode, security footage, and voice recordings shared before anyone checks the lens or the original file. The tools can preserve what people heard or saw. They cannot always preserve the cause. Ghosts changed because the living changed. A hungry relative became a chained stranger, then a white figure, a knock, a photograph, and a voice on tape. But death can end a life without ending grief, guilt, love, or a final question. Somewhere tonight, food is being left for the dead. Somewhere, an old voice message is playing. Somewhere, a camera is watching an empty hall. Different tools, same unfinished need. Subscribe for a new history and mystery every week. Which ghost stays with you?